Finally, let me just ask you about your own work. You've written over 80 books, taught in numerous universities around the world, initiated and directed many interdisciplinary programs. I wonder that on reflecting on your own most deeply held interest, what are the ideas, themes, and periods and questions that act to connect your work across so many differences?
Well, if we start to think about the humanities, the sciences and the social sciences, as well as professional education, as asking a whole set of interlocking questions, one of the questions they ask, and it's the one that I've been most interested in, is who are we? How do we think about ourselves, and how do we think about other people? I've spent a career looking at stereotypes, at notions of difference, and I've been interested in both the psychological models by which we understand how people are seen as different and how we see ourselves, but also the way that these models have evolved historically. That is, I don't see these models in the social sciences and in psychiatry as, in other words, simply hardwired. I see them as one of the contributions that culture gives us to understanding ourselves and the world. My own work is reflected on a whole range of questions about how do we constitute ideas of difference using a whole range of evidence, from medical history to literature, from psychiatric studies through to the studies of the sociologists who are interested in difference. And my job has been for 40 years is to hold their feet to the fire, to ask not only what is it that you see difference to be, but how do you as a thinker come to think about what being difference is. And since this is an ongoing project, that is, these are things that do not change, that are always changing, that do not remain static. My work has been, in a sense, also evolving. I've just finished a book which is coming out of December of this year asking, are racists crazy? That is, there is a kind of a stereotype of the racist that arises in the early 20th century that sees racism as a type of psychopathology, whether aimed at African Americans, as at the Chinese, at the Jews. And one of the things that I try to argue in this book is that by seeing this as psychopathology, you in a sense remove the obligation of society to deal with racism as a quality of individual choice. And one of the things that I got interested in through that is to ask if it is not a psychopathology, that is, if it is not something that can be cured by a pill. The book begins with a study that was published a few years ago by colleagues in Oxford who argue that giving beta blockers to people who have prejudice reduces their prejudice. And there's the notion there in the background that maybe we should put beta blockers in the water, right? Like fluorine. We'll get rid of prejudice by the same way we got rid of cavities. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do in that book is to ask, how did we get to this seemingly ludicrous conclusion? But also, if it's not psychopathology, what is it? And I go back to Hannah Arendt and I say, maybe we want to reintroduce the idea of evil and human choice. And not evil in some kind of a supernatural, the devil will get you notion, but evil in the way that we make moral choices in the world. And that's a lot more difficult to deal with than dismissing racism as a form of mental illness.